Good morning, Bitcoins. We're live from Tone Vay's Unconfiscatable Conference in Las Vegas, Nevada. We're joined by Trace Mayer. How's it going, Trace?
Yeah, wonderful. Glad to be here.
Now, of course, we have to get to the hardest questions first. The price of Bitcoin is down. The Bitcoin ETF has been stopped by the government shutdown, and the hodlers are worried. What kind of hope can you give to the people at home about the future of Bitcoin?
Well, I wouldn't say that the hodlers are worried. The hodlers they're doing great. And this is actually a great opportunity because you're able to acquire more Satoshis for the same number of dollars. So I don't know why people don't actually like having the price being down. And the hodlers, with things like Ledger X, they can actually use their Bitcoins to acquire more Bitcoin in a fairly relatively risk-free way. So
you could lend out the Bitcoins for others to use?
no, you don't lend them out. You use them as collateral for selling covered calls. And so you can sell covered calls that have far out of the money strikes, and you keep the premium and they expire worthless is kind of the thinking. And so, this is a way that I think the volatility of Bitcoin might begin to subside a little bit, but you never know when people start chasing that rabbit.
Well, and just when everyone says it's over and it's not volatile, that's when it does something like fall to 3,600 or jump to 6,400, whatever it's going to do next.
20,000 or jump to 20,000, right?
That was quite exciting. But is there any good event out there? I know previously I used to say, well, the Silk Road's going to close eventually. Mt. Gox is going to go away. We'll get better infrastructure, more serious exchanges. What kind of positive news is there out there for Bitcoin? The ETF, very much on hold. That's previously what I used to look for, other than just mainstream adoption and everyone waking up and thinking Bitcoin's awesome like we do. Yeah.
Yeah, so Caitlin Long has been working on a bill in Wyoming, and I've actually spent quite a few hours on conference calls with...
You didn't have to go to Wyoming, did you?
No, but I go next week, actually, and the plan is to meet with the banking commissioner and help walk through the bill a little bit and why we put different stuff in the way we did, because this bill would actually create a special purpose depository bank for digital assets. We would also clean up liens that could be on Bitcoins as a result of UCC sections like 8 and 9. It will prohibit rehypothecation. The custodians will be accountable to customers when it comes to altcoins and forks and airdrops. And most importantly, I would say, is that the bill will provide the legal infrastructure for a qualified custodian under the SEC. And that would then lay the foundation for things like the ETF. Because almost all of these large institutional players, they cannot allocate capital into this space because the legal infrastructure is not there. Especially with like ERISA fiduciaries. ERISA is the pension act. And Caitlin has a lot of experience with this because she ran the pension practice at Morgan Stanley. And she was an ERISA fiduciary. And she was actually sued twice as an ERISA fiduciary. And they have personal liability. And so when you're managing these retirement funds, you have to have all the I's dotted and all the T's crossed, which is what her job was to do at Morgan Stanley. And so with all of that experience that she brings, it's like, how do we put forth the legal infrastructure that the Bitcoin economy and the cryptocurrency economy needs in order to go to the next level, where you can have pension funds allocating capital into Bitcoin or other crypto-related assets. And so, that's what we've been working on in Wyoming. Hopefully it goes up for vote in a few weeks, and then we could have banks operational within a couple months.
So you mentioned one of the problems with the Bitcoin ETF. They said they were kind of the same people were holding the Bitcoin, the same people were telling you the price of the Bitcoin as the same people that were selling you the Bitcoin ETF. It was all Winklevi at every level. What you're saying with this new system, you could have a trusted person who could hold the Bitcoin, thus taking out one of the SEC's potential problems with the Bitcoin ETF.
Well, the problem is you need to be a, quote, qualified custodian. That is a legal term of art. And a qualified custodian they're under the jurisdiction of the SEC, even if they hold commodities. So you would think those would be under the jurisdiction of the CFTC. It's not the case. That, like, if a hedge fund wants to buy a bunch of gold, like, they need to hold it with a qualified custodian that is under the SEC's jurisdiction. And so, we don't have this type of legal infrastructure in place for digital assets. And so that's what, this legislation is going to do. What it's crafted to do is tighten up all of this stuff so that we can now have custodians of digital assets. And that's another problem that we've got, is a lot of these exchanges or what have you, they're making the markets, they're custodying the assets, they're running an OTC desk, they're trading against their clients. I mean, like, there really are a lot of substantive issues that are ripe for conflicts of interest. For example, in this custodianship bill, and we got a lot of pushback from current custodians, one of the things we have is that all value that may accrue from the digital asset has to accrue to the benefit of the customer.
That's shocking.
Oh, totally shocking, right? Because almost every custodian out there, like, what about micro Bitcoin or Bitcoin Diamond, or like how about Byteball? Like, guess what? There are a lot of custodians out there. That's how they made their profits, right? Is they claimed a bunch of these forks or airdrops. They didn't give the proceeds to their customers. Like, this bill would make it, like, this bill is very clear. All value has to accrue to the value of the customer. When it comes to, like, a fork policy, you have to agree in advance, in writing, on what the source code is that's used to determine what the digital asset is. And then any ambiguity is resolved in the favor of the customer. That's the way it should be, right? Like Coinbase shouldn't be able to say, well, Bitcoin is this and now it's that, and here you got the real Bitcoin.
And especially to take their time too. It took months and months. The price went up and down. At which point do they give it to you? They could just buy it on the market and then give it to you later when it's worth less.
Well, after they sold it for more, that's when they give it to you, right? But these are a lot of the issues that segregating out custodians from the exchanges, I think, is just part of the maturation and the growing up of the industry. And the current custodians, like, they don't want it to be clear cut, and they don't want it to be in favor of the customer. They want to get the money from the Byteball, not you. They want to get the money from the Stellar, not you, but it's your asset. But right now, like, where's your recourse? Go and ask your custodian, like, where's my Byteball? What'd you do with it? Where's my micro Bitcoin? Where's my Bitcoin Diamond? Like, what'd you do with it? Where's my Bitcoin Gold? Yeah, there are no answers, and they're not cryptographically proving and showing the audit trail. Guess what? A special purpose depository bank, they're going to be subject to audits. And all this stuff, like, there's going to be federal regulators in there. They're going to be auditing everything. Any value that might be accrued, it has to go to the customer. A lot of this stuff has to be disclosed in writing in advance. Like, this is property rights, that are coming down, which is a very libertarian concept that even Murray Rothbard would be in favor of. He would be in favor of governmental regulations that enforce property rights. Like, that's not anti-libertarian.
Well, and it's not just exchanges. It's also retail shops, places where you might keep your change from your Bitcoin transactions, or maybe you left some Bitcoin there to shop later. What happens to that Bitcoin? What happens to the forks attached to that Bitcoin? It's not very clear right now, and having some clarity would help a lot, I think.
Yeah, having the legal clarity, then we kind of know the rules of the road. And also, you don't have to use Wyoming. One of the things in the Wyoming bill, it's very explicit. You cannot rehypothecate.
Now, you mentioned that earlier. I was going to ask for the people at home, what is rehypothecation?
So rehypothecation is where somebody pledges their asset as collateral for a loan. And then the person who received that pledge, they now rehypothecate it, or they repledge it to someone else, who repledges it to someone else, who repledges it to someone else. And so at the end of the day, you might have 8 or 10 or 12 people who have legal claim to the same chair.
So that's why they always give me like the gold ticket instead of the actual gold bar.
Oh, yeah, well, definitely that. I mean, they don't want to deliver the Bitcoins if they don't have to, because those are scarce and limited in amount. And so, like, this prevents rehypothecation. So you can lend, you can use your Bitcoin as collateral, but the person who receives it, who's got that claim on collateral, they can't then pledge that as collateral somewhere else. And so, you know, this... and this rehypothecation is a form of fraud, but guess what? It's legalized in New York. So what are you going to do? You're going to keep your assets at a company that's got a BIT license where it's legal to rehypothecate? No, I mean these are competitive decisions that companies are going to have to start making. Do you do business in a jurisdiction where it's legal to engage in fraud and rehypothecation, or do you do business in Wyoming where property rights are respected? And then as a customer, who do you want to do business with? Do you want to do business where all the value accrues to the benefit of the customer, or do you want to do business where that's not specified and where they can just rehypothecate your stuff, so they might not even have the Bitcoin to then get the fork? Right? So, I mean, this is legal clarity that helps enforce property rights for customers.
Well, it's great to have a positive example from Wyoming. I remember when the BIT license was announced, everyone pulled out of New York and they started avoiding New York, but we didn't have the alternative. We didn't have a place for them to go where they could get a fair shake, a clear shake, where they could follow it along. This also ties into an event you held recently, the Proof of Keys Day. How did that go, and how would that prevent rehypothecation?
Yeah, so proof of keys, I mean, it prevents it real quick, because you say, send all the Bitcoins to this address right now. And they either send it or they don't. And so they I don't care how many times you pledge those Bitcoins, and I don't care however many people might have claim on them. I want possession of them right now. And Bitcoin's limited in amount. And so that's what proof of keys was all about. January 3rd, every year, proof of keys. We withdraw all of our Bitcoins on January 3rd from any third-party service. That's new cultural tradition. And I was reading, someone had made a little post about it because they were trying to see, well, what type of impact might it have had? Well, I put the tweet out. Within a week, Coinbase tested their cold storage and moved 865,000 Bitcoins around. Maybe to calm people down? I don't know, because... I mean, it's kind of a crazy thing. Think about it. A global, worldwide, coordinated bank run on an asset that's strictly limited in amount. Like, what could go wrong? It sounds fun to me, right? So I find it interesting that, like, Coinbase just happened to test their cold storage the next week. But, you know, we saw some problems. Bitfinex, they suspended withdrawals for 3 hours. Multiple complaints against HitBTC for not even sending the coins out at all. I read an article, someone was trying to examine the blockchain, and I guess, like, based on differences from, like, the averages over days, it looked like approximately like 30 to 50,000 transactions above normal in total over a few days, and maybe about $2 billion of value. So, you know, I started it December 9th. It got a little bit of traction, so less than a month. I didn't want to have it, like, get too much attention and everything. You know, enough to rattle the cage. But next year, you know, it's going to be a lot bigger, because guess what just got delivered today?
What?
30 hats with, like, the little money badger with the coins in there, and it says underneath it, proof of keys. So we're going to have hats, and we're going to be able to really talk about this and educate, like, people about how to do their own network consensus by running their own full node, how to hold their own private keys, because we got a lot of new people that come into the space. And, like, if you don't do this, you're going to get wrecked. Like, Mt. Gox is going to happen. like again and again and again and again and again. Like, trusted third parties are security holes. And so, bringing this full circle to the first part of our discussion, when you're looking at property rights with Bitcoin, you've got private keys, full node and private keys. Those are technical solutions. Those give you dominion and control over the Bitcoin, not necessarily ownership. Ownership is a legal question that is going to be determined based on whatever legal regime applies. And these two are completely discrete from each other. The Bitcoin network does not care what a judge's order is. And guess what? A judge does not care that Bitcoin does not comply. And there are interesting analogies with this. For example, offshore asset protection trusts. There's one case where somebody created one of these, wired the money into it. The judge is like, hey, you got to send that money back. And the guy's like, well, I'm not the trustee. I don't have the power to send it back. Or in other words, I don't have the private keys to send it back. And the judge is like, well, I think you have influence with the trustee or whatever, so I'm going to use Section 526 of the Bankruptcy Act, hold you in civil contempt, throw you in jail indefinitely where you can't challenge your detention until you send the money back. Want to know how it got resolved?
They sent the money back?
No. The judge retired. 14 years later, a new judge was given the case, and the new judge, I guess just to be nice, felt that the contempt didn't hold that persuasion that results from being held in contempt and being in the coercive power of the contempt was not effective, so he let the guy out of jail. He spent 14 years in jail, not able to challenge his illegal detention because the judge thought he had the power to bring the money back from the Offshore Asset Protection Trust. Well, guess what? Under the Uniform Commercial Code, Sections 8 and 9, with these liens that get attached to Bitcoins, and thousands of these liens get attached every day because, like, Genesis Trading is taking Bitcoins in and lending money on them, and they're attaching liens to the coins, and then the coins go out here, and then, like, the coins might get sent over here to Coinbase, and then you buy the coins from Coinbase. Well, guess what? When you buy the coins, the legal issue is, do you own the coins? Well, guess what? If Coinbase does not have clear title to the coins that you bought, then you take the coins subject to someone else who has superior title to the coins. And with these UCC liens, the way they function is that even a bona fide purchaser has subordinated title to the person with the lien. And a bona fide purchaser would be someone who has no idea that the lien even exists. Right? So you're not buying a Bitcoin. You're buying a Bitcoin that's subject to a lien. And there's no legal infrastructure.
So you could be forced to give it back. Someone could then compel you to give it back and lock you in jail to force you.
Yeah, like, oh, you bought the Bitcoins from Coinbase? Yes, I did. Oh, you withdrew them from Coinbase? Yes, I did. Well, you need to send them to Bank of America because they have a lien on those Bitcoins. They have superior title. No, I bought them from Coinbase. No, you sent them to Bank of America. No, I'm not going to do it. Okay, civil contempt. You're in jail indefinitely until you send it. Oh, well, I lost the private keys. Prove it, says the judge. How do you prove it?
You can't.
You can't because you can't prove that you don't have the secret. So, I mean, this is very dangerous stuff because, these liens follow the Bitcoins through the entire trail everywhere. So a vast majority of the Bitcoins are encumbered with these liens. And it doesn't really matter when it's a $65 billion market cap, but it matters a lot when it's a $2 trillion market cap. Because now the plaintiff attorneys are like, oh, there's a lot of money over there. I'm going to go get it for Bank of America. And if they have legal right to it, it doesn't matter if you have the dominion and control with the private key. They have legal right to it.
That's gonna upset everyone at home. They like code is law. I have the private keys. They're my Bitcoin. But you're saying there's a legal level above that that's going to use a legal wrench to try to take those keys from me.
Well, it's an additional attack surface and attack vector that you should be aware of. there's a guy sitting in jail for life who probably has some private keys to some Bitcoins. His name's Ross Ulbricht, and he's going to die in jail because he lost his appeal. He's done, right? He is totally done. If they have you, they effectively have your Bitcoins. Like, why do you want to have this attack service or this attack vector on yourself? Like, if you don't have to. So that's what we're trying to clean up with this particular bill in Wyoming, is we want to, these coins that would pass through Wyoming custodians, starts tolling this 2-year statute of limitations. And why 2 years? Well, that's the statute of limitations in the federal bankruptcy code. So, when you're dealing with politics, I mean, there's what you want, and then there's what can maybe get passed, right? Like politics, it sucks. And so, 2 years is fairly reasonable. It's sane. It's the current statute of limitations on bankruptcy.
So the current liens would stay with the coins for 2 years if they pass through Wyoming, but after that they'd be clean.
Right. Yeah, that's how it's set up to work. And so, would you rather buy coins from a Wyoming, that are held with a Wyoming custodian or with a New York custodian? Because the New York custodian's not going to be cleansing these UCC liens. And once they pass through that Wyoming custodian, it might go 3, 4, 5 hops or whatever, and then you buy the coins. Well, you at least are cleansing coins somewhere in the process of the whole thing, right? So I look at it as taking additional territory. Let's start closing some of these attack surfaces and attack vectors if we can. Because, I just really don't like the idea of UCC liens and bankruptcy and civil contempt on, magic internet money. I just think that's a recipe for a really bad disaster.
They get all their laws all over it and they ruin it. But it sounds like we've got some good stuff going in Wyoming. It sounds like an excellent law. And I'd be glad to see, like you're saying, that a counterbalance to New York. You can get your coins from New York, or you can get your coins from Wyoming. So maybe Kraken or Coinbase will have to set up an office there soon.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, another thing to keep in mind, the legal regime applies regardless of what your personal sentiments are. And the legal regime was set up before Bitcoin. And Bitcoin gets shoot in wherever it most likely fits. So, the UCC makes an exception for currency, for money, like dollars, And so those are super negotiable. So liens aren't going to follow the dollars, right? And that's because there's a public policy interest of not wanting to encumber particular dollar bills, even though they have serial numbers, kind of like UTXOs are unique in that sense. Well,
and with computer scanners, you could now scan the bills and get the serial numbers. It used to be really difficult if you think about it, but now it's doable. You could put them on a conveyor belt. You could find out all the serial numbers of all the bills you have and sue all the people that had them previously.
Well, what do you think they do with the ATM records? No, which have been used in drug cases, right? Because it's isn't that convenient? You got all these $20 bills that just happen to come out of this ATM all at the same time.
And phone records are the same way. Everyone's was so secret with their cell phones. You just get a big list of it. You have it all there. You just go right through it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and the blockchain's there. Chainalysis, they could become a new collections company. As soon as those Bitcoins get sent into an exchange for deposit, they immediately get seized and transferred to Bank of America.
A beautiful future for Bitcoin. What a wonderful thing we created with Satoshi Nakamoto.
Well, Bitcoin is great. What's not so great is the legal regimes that are out there. But hey, that's just part of the game theory, and that's just part of the circumstances in the world that we live in. And thinking that your software code is superior to the legal regime, and that they're somehow mutually exclusive. It's no, I want the most protection possible from both of them. And just like software, just like developers are wizards, guess what? Lawyers are wizards too. and they work with legal code, just not software code. And Caitlin is like an arch wizard when it comes to understanding how all of these intricacies work and play out, and like how to craft it in the best way possible, or at least what I would say would be the best way possible for our industry. Because, you know, we want to have property rights. We don't want to have stuff like rehypothecation in New York. We don't want Goldman Sachs or some of the current Bitcoin custodians writing the laws, you know, because they're going to write stuff that is not friendly to the consumer, to the customer, to the hodler. You know, so these are all very important considerations, I think, that we need to at least be aware of. Because if you're not aware of it, you don't know what you're buying. You know, I mean, and then people are like, oh, well, I'm just going to mix the Bitcoins. Oh, that's a great idea. Like, you're going to take Bitcoins that are already got these potential liens on them, and you're going to mix them with other Bitcoins that also probably have liens on them. Like, I mean, so it's a real, like, it's not an easy solution.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Trace, for joining us, and enjoy the conference, and we hope to speak to you again soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.